After Lance died, I was afraid of so many things. Driving was probably the biggest one. For about 3 years, I could only drive a few miles by myself. If I had someone else in the car with me, I could drive further. But last year, I found myself far away from home in a position where I had to drive home by myself, and it was 800 miles. Lance and I had lived such an isolated life for over a dozen years. Everything that I was comfortable with went away when he died. And so I found everything new to be scary. And I found a lot of the old things that I used to do scary as well. But as I began facing my fears and taking those baby steps, which to an outsider looked like baby steps, but to me, they were huge obstacles. I realized that it made the next thing less scary. There were a lot of baby steps, but there were times when I just was tired of the baby steps and I would take a huge step forward just to prove to myself that I could do it. And I would make myself get out of my comfort zone. I still have a ways to go, but as I look back over the last couple of years, I'm amazed at where I was then and how far I've come. And I only got here because I was willing to get out of my comfort zone. But I haven't done it alone. I have a pretty big community of people supporting me and cheering me on. And Jenna's been one of my biggest cheerleaders.
Well, it has been an absolute joy and a privilege to just observe this process of you growing and changing and getting outside of that comfort zone and watching you heal in a real way. Because there have been times when I've watched people go through hardship or trauma or loss or things like that. And I'll watch as they recover, and it's really fast. And all of a sudden, and I think, I'm not sure they can sustain that because that seems like just adrenaline, right? And almost every time that kind of burns out and they nosedive, and it's hard to watch, but I've seen it enough times to know that that's a pretty um, common response to going through a loss or a trauma.
Well, I can see how somebody would think that they're better because it is a complete roller coaster going through from trauma to healing, where something happens and you feel like you're on top of the world and you're like, woohoo, I'm I'm good. I'm ready to go. And then something knocks me down again. So I can see where their minds go. It's hard, and it's a lot harder than you ever imagine it will be.
I can't even imagine um, trying to process the things that, some of the people that I have observed trying to process the things that they're trying to process. So what you're saying makes sense. They're thinking that they're better. I see you and I watch the way that you walked through it. And if I'm honest, when you first lost Lance, I think I was expecting that same trajectory that I had seen before. I had seen it in friends and loved ones and different people who had gone through loss. And so I was kind of prepared for you to go through the same process that I had seen. And I was really surprised at the end of it that, or not in the end, I guess in the middle, I was surprised that your path was different. You didn't do it the same way I had seen it done in the past. And I was very interested in your path to healing, and watching you over the last several years has been really extraordinary because you have prioritized your authentic growth by getting out of your comfort zone, by challenging yourself, by um, addressing and identifying the areas that were scariest to you and facing those head on. And I can't even tell you how inspiring that's been to me over the years, just to see that that really does work. What I would assume worked, although I've never been in that specific situation, it really does work. And watching you prove that over time has been such an honor to watch. So I'm really proud of you, and I think this is really a good thing for us to be covering for somebody who maybe is going through this process and is looking for maybe a better way forward.
Well, like I've already said, I haven't done this alone. I've done this with a team of people supporting me. And I had to weed out a lot of people. I had to surround myself with the right kind of people, people who are positive, people who are supportive and encouraging, people who are cheerleaders to help me get through this. And I've been seeing a counselor for years and years and years. I had a counselor all the years that I cared for Lance full time, and I couldn't have done it without her. So this was not something that I did on my own. It's not something that I would recommend doing on your own. I would recommend surrounding yourself with the right kind of people to help you move forward, to get out of your comfort zone.
So, as you moved through that space of healing, of growth, of moving forward, of getting outside your comfort zone, how did like momentum affect you? And how did it affect your tolerance to new experiences, new things? I'm thinking about the momentum of positive choices, right? So as you do one positive thing or you make one good choice, it can kind of propel you to make the next right choice, and vice versa. As you move into a negative, you know, feeling sorry for yourself, kind of angry phase, then that moves that momentum backward. My curiosity, though, is about as that momentum is moving forward, did you find that that kept you going, or did it wear you out? Like, did you have to stop and say, I can't handle any more change. I can't handle any more outside of my comfort zone. I need a rest. Or did it just kind of snowball into bigger and bigger decisions?
Oh, wow. It's kind of done all of that. It has been such a roller coaster ride, good and bad, up and down. I mean, it's just, there were times that it would push me to keep going because it was just kind of a thrill. I'm a little bit of a thrill seeker anyway. So the thrill of it kept me going because I wanted that adrenaline. But then there were times that there was so much happening so quickly that it would exhaust me and I would just need a break. And I still am like that now. There are still times when I'm like, okay, I have been doing so much. I just need to calm down and I need to take some time to rest. But then there were also the times that I would do something or I would try to do something and I would fail at it. And my fear was I started at a place where I felt like I was so far behind everyone else because, while everybody else was living their lives, I was living a very different life and I had a lot of catching up to do. And so I'm still really far behind. So when I fail at something, I'm afraid that I'm going to go backwards so far and I'm going to have to do all that work to catch up again. So when I fail at something, I take a break, I reassess the situation, and then I get back to it because I don't want that to be the last thing that I am left with. I don't want that to be the last thought that I am left with. Oh, I failed at that.
I can see that would be scary. um, Speaking of momentum and knowing when to push forward and when to take a break and rest, I was thinking about, as a personal trainer, I used to tell people that you have two voices in your brain. I think I probably told you this before. You have two voices, and one is wisdom and one is a whiner. And the whining voice in your head says, I can't do this anymore. And wisdom says, I shouldn't do this anymore. And we know your brain will give up way before your body will. So I think as soon as you like really internalize that information, it can kind of help make you a little bit tougher mentally. When you realize, oh, your body's going to just keep going. And I'm speaking in terms of physical activity from a trainer perspective. Understanding that, oh, my mind's giving up, my body's still going, but my mind's going to give up. And differentiating between I can't do this anymore and I shouldn't do this anymore. Do you feel like you had a pretty good handle on listening for those two voices in your head as you were going into this, so you knew when to press forward to keep going and keep trying new things, and when to like kind of hit the brakes and say, I'm gonna rest now, my body needs to rest? Like, do you think you had that going into it and that served you in that time, or did you develop that as you were going through your healing?
Well, I think that that goes back to self-care. We've talked about self-care, and I learned very early on in Lance's disease that I needed to care for myself. So I learned what I needed more than 20 years before he died. So I think that that was just in me to know when I needed to take a break, and that taking a break didn't mean I was stopping. It meant I was giving my body and my mind the rest that it needed so that I would be stronger for the next round.
Perfect. Perfect. So the last thing I wanted to ask you about this topic was kind of about motivation. And because I think this is so interesting that, human beings are kind of primarily motivated by fear of negative response, something bad, or reward, right? Something positive on the other side. So those two motivations either move you kind of forward or back in life. And I was curious, like, if you thought you were more motivated by the fear of stagnation or the loss of your future self, or if you were more motivated by the potential and possibility of what you could be by overcoming these things, or did that shift? Like, what was your primary motivation? Was it fear of going backward, or was it the thrill of the adventure ahead of you?
Well, talking about fear, and I know you didn't ask this specifically, but in the beginning, for me, it was fear of the unknown that kept me from pursuing things. And then I got to a point where I realized I was just existing. I was not living. And all the years that I cared for Lance, my goal was always to make sure that we didn't end up in that spot, because we were at that spot for a very short period of time where we were just existing. And I remembered that, and I did not want it to be that. So my fear pushed me to do things in the beginning. And as I succeeded or failed, it pushed me to move forward. And I've already said I'm a thrill seeker. I love the thrill of something that scares me just enough, gets me excited enough to do it. And so that kept me going. It still keeps me going. Sometimes though, that fear does make me pause and maybe take a little bit of extra time to make sure that my motivation for doing it is the right motivation, not just for the thrill.
Well, that's something I was going to say, is making sure that you're being motivated by the right fear. or that you are seeking the right reward. Because I think that you could be motivated by the reward of self-pity, because sometimes that's a nice, warm, cozy blanket that you can go curl up in and feel sorry for yourself. But you were motivated by the reward of success and overcoming and knowing your own strength. On the opposite side, you could be motivated by the fear of the unknown, right? That's scary. I'm going to go back in my house. I can't look at that. Instead, you chose to be motivated by the fear of where you had been and stagnation and never knowing what's really out there and never feeling that thrill of success. So I think the fear of failure could be maybe a more positive motivator than the fear of whatever negative things might be in the future, right? So you're afraid of what has been rather than what might be. I think that's maybe a better way to put it.
For me, it was the fear of not actually living and just existing. I don't want to just exist. I want to live. But I will say that I'm still dealing with learning how to get out of my comfort zone. I'm not there. I still have a ways to go, but I'm getting closer every time I push myself to get out of my comfort zone. And I would encourage anyone to do that. Get out of your comfort zone. It helps you grow, it helps you live. And for me, living is why we're here. And to have that freedom that I never had before, that's another motivator for me after being isolated for so many years and not having the freedom to come and go. That freedom, just the freedom to get outside and walk, that's huge.
We're never going to arrive at a place where there's no more comfort zone, because that's the way it works. As we overcome, we create a new comfort zone. And so that overcoming, well, I hope that it happens for the rest of my life. I hope that I go to my grave trying new things, because I just think that we could live 100 lifetimes and never experience everything that this world and this life has to offer. So every time I develop a new comfort zone, I hope I step out of it again.
And I hope the same for myself. So get out of your comfort zone. Do the things that scare you just a little bit. That'll help you grow. Thanks for joining me, Jenna, and I will see you next time.
All right. Well, see ya. Bye.